It's hard to imagine a broadcast world devoid of sports radio and constant local sports television coverage. Regional sports TV networks across the nation televise seemingly every major pro and college game, even some high school events. And most major markets have at least one all-sports radio station on the dial. The state of Arizona was introduced to both by sports broadcast pioneer George Allen. Over a career that began at KTAR Radio in 1973, George was the voice, the face, and creative force behind the evolution of these two new media. In 1975, George and colleague John Moynihan founded and co-hosted the Valley's first sports talk radio show, KTAR 620 Sportsline. Now, Phoenix boasts 3 full-time 24-hour-a-day sports radio stations, including KTAR, which still has the Sportsline as a staple of its program schedule. After 8 years on radio, George took his passion for sports broadcasting to a fledgling cable television company, American Cable. During the summer of 1981, the Arizona Sports Programming Network hit the airwaves of Phoenix. This was only 2 years after the launch of ESPN, well before its now golden track record was established. George was the face and the voice of ESPN, calling any and all local sports on the channel. From the Phoenix Suns to ASU basketball and baseball to the event that was his signature, the high school football game of the week.
I think the thing that I appreciated most about working with George Allen was how much he cared about high school football. And the guy knew as much as anybody. He could rattle off the top of his head how many state championships this coach won here, coaches that had the most wins in school history and state history. He knew the rivalries of the schools.
You watch the kids at the games, whether they're playing in the game, whether they're cheerleaders or whether they're fans, they were crazy. They loved it. And every time they'd see our truck pull in, they'd go nuts because the cameras are there, and that was a big deal back then.
For nearly 20 years, George scheduled the games, researched the players, built relationships with the coaches, and delivered memorable play-by-play.
Handoff, give it off to Calder, wing back reverse, a lot of running room. He's at the 50, he's in Chandler territory. It's a foot race, and he is finally dragged out of bounds at about the 25-yard line. Manny Palomares from the secondary made the touchdown-saving tackle.
Cox Communications recently completed the 25th anniversary season of televising high school football, now statewide and broadcast live, but its roots can be traced to Girard High School and the back of a pickup truck. Beyond his call of the games, Allen was also the station's program director. In addition to ASPN's local sports coverage, he brought out-of-the-market Major League Baseball games and National Hockey League games to Phoenix, long before the Diamondbacks and Coyotes found their way to the desert. George Allen was not only a pioneer in sports broadcasting, he was a mentor to an entire generation of producers, directors, and announcers.
George really showed me the passion that he had for it and his willingness to treat each one of these games as if it was a big league, big time network broadcast. And I've never forgotten that, and I always appreciate him for that lesson.
Whether he was announcing the Suns-Sonics game in which Tom Chambers scored a franchise record 60 points, or a high school football game where there was 1,000 people in the stands, George treated each broadcast as if there were 1 million people watching. Phoenix may never see a more passionate, prepared, and professional broadcaster than George Allen. And George, call Doug and let's go to lunch.